everyone and welcome to another video where I explain something you probably already knew. Riot is still on their streak of releasing new cinematics, and so I'm sitting here like a slave explaining everything I can. After we covered 2 cinematics and Riot released another one, I decided to go back to the original Tales of Runeterra reveal and check out what other cinematics were teased. So, from what I noticed, there will also be the Ionian cinematic with Akali and Shen that everybody knows about. There will also be a Piltover cinematic with Heimerdinger, with the separate cinematic for Zaun with Jinx, or at least I assume they are gonna be separate, because from the teasers the styles of the cinematics looked different. And there will also be a cinematic about Noxus with Darius. That would mean that every single region would get its own cinematic, apart from Ishtal and Shurima. Somehow I couldn't find a single Shuriman teaser, but there is still the hope that Riot will release a cinematic for every single region. Anyway, let's continue with our streak of explaining cinematics, and let's have a look at the Shadow Isles cinematic, called None Escape.
Few know the truth of the Shadow Isles.
At the very beginning we hear a somewhat familiar voice. Some may be thinking that this is the Ruined King speaking, or just one of the Restless Souls. But the reason why this voice is somewhat familiar is because this is actually the voice of Thresh. But it is just so much higher quality compared to the in-game voice that it doesn't really sound like Thresh. Which is understandable, Thresh was released a long time ago. Anyway, as you can see from the text on the bottom, we are in the ruins of Helya. With Helya of course being the former capital city of the Blessed Isles, which was turned into the Shadow Isles thanks to a horse. There are 2 things to note about this initial shot. First of all, notice the moon. It will be important much later on, but remember, there is a moon. And also we have this boat protected by holy magic. Now the funny thing is that in League of Legends there is technically no holy magic. Maybe with the exception of Kayle. League doesn't really have priests or paladins praying to holy gods. And the light Lux is using is technically just bright fire. With that said, people are still praying to gods. Not those that you would expect, but there are some. Which explains who these people are. At first, from the clothing, I wasn't really sure where these guys were from. I thought that they looked like Shurimans, and they kind of had Shuriman accents. Or they could be Ishtali. But all I had to do in order to learn where these guys were from was to look at the description. Here it is explained that these 2 guys are a Buhuru priestess and her acolyte son. Now, if you are not sure who are the Buhuru is a little island right next to the Serpent Isles, or in other words, Bilgewater. And if you look closely at their appearance, there is a reason why they look like Illaoi. Because Illaoi is a priestess of Nagake Boros, which is the god the Buhuru natives pray to. So even though there is no real holy magic in League of Legends, these Buhuru priests are surrounded by a holy bubble, because this is likely the magic granted to them by Nagake Boros. I don't think we learn either of their names, so let's just call them the priestess and the acolyte. It seems like this is the first time the acolyte is visiting the Shadow Isles, because he curiously reaches out and does the smartest thing I've seen in a while. He goes outside the comfort zone and tries to grab literal death. Of course he gets spooked by a nearby ghost. And as this spectre tries to attack them, the cinematic hints at something that will come later on. Notice that the undead of the Shadow Isles can't go through the holy bubble. This will be also important later on, just like the moon that is still curiously hovering at the background. The priestess then says to the acolyte that perhaps he is not ready, and the acolyte reveals that the reason why they are here is because the black mist is reaching out from the Shadow Isles further and further, and someone has to deal with it. And that is exactly why we have 2 Buhuru priests here. It's because, in case you are not familiar with Illaoi's lore, the believers of Nagake Boros see the creatures of the Shadow Isles as abominations. The Nagake Boros' religion is all about moving forward. If you stop progressing, evolving and simply getting better, then you don't really have a reason to live. So to the Buhuru, the undead are technically just frozen in time, and so they have no real place on this world. That's why it is specifically the Buhuru who are trying to deal with the undead. The acolyte then mentioned that his mission here is to go on the Shadow Isles, light up a ward and then go back. And he also hinted at the fact that his father died doing exactly this. So partially he is probably doing this to avenge him. And with that, the acolyte leaves the boat, carries a little bit of holy water with him, and he lights up the ward with the holy water. What is interesting is that most people didn't even notice the massive chain of wards behind him. This shows us that around some parts of the Shadow Isles, there are these massive holy walls that are keeping the undead from spreading even further. But with time, the wards that are holding these walls up will run out of juice. Quite literally. Except here, the juice is holy water. So this shows us that the Buhuru often travel here to make sure the wall is still standing. But then the Acolyte sees a spirit. And of course, it would be none other than his father. And so, being inexperienced with dealing with the undead, and not realizing the horrors the undead can do to you, once again he leaves the comfort zone, and he ventures out right into a massive pool of death magic. Now, looking at the ruins around him, they do vaguely resemble an image that is titled Library Keep. Now, normally I wouldn't even mention this, because even though they are vaguely similar, they aren't really anything alike, are they? But because I know what is going to happen in this cinematic, I can tell you that this is probably the Library Keep. It may be just an updated version of it. And that's where the main character runs. And then we get to this very interesting place. Of course, if you remember the images from Universe, you know that this is the Celestial Vault that is unlocked by the revelations of the Lunatropic Demisphere. This sounds confusing, so let me translate it. The Lunatropic Demisphere is the device in the middle. Because it is lunatropic, it is trying to catch the light of the moon. Remember, there is a moon outside. And the description says that this is how the vaults are unlocked. They are unlocked by the moon. Before we move forward, just remember the position this is in right now. You can notice that it is in a different position than the image on Universe. That is simply because the moon above it is in a different position. What is also interesting here is that unlike the image on Universe, here you can see the next room. And if you look at the ceiling there, it looks exactly like the image titled Library Interior. It really holds no meaning, but it's cool to see that Riot is connecting all of these images. And our main character just runs through, blindly following the spirit that looks like his father, because that is always a good idea. And we end up in this room. Now, I tried to look for some hints as to what this might be. I noticed a YouTube play button here, but I don't think that was intended. But when I compared it to all the images on Universe, I noticed it is not there. So this is a brand new room. And looking at all the separate entrances at the sides, I think that this might be the jail. This is where Thresh tortured his victims. And as the Acolyte catches up to the spirit, we get this horrifying scene. I just want you to listen to the sound effects because you don't need sleep anyway.
Poor lost souls.
And of course, the spirit gets sucked to Thresh's lantern. And you can hear that the voice is actually slightly different than the voice at the beginning of the cinematic. I wonder if that was intended, so that the voice at the very beginning wouldn't immediately give out that Thresh is part of this. But nevertheless, Thresh is here. And he weirdly does and doesn't move his mouth when he's speaking. It looks like he is moving his mouth to speak, but later on he's speaking more and he doesn't move his mouth. So I have no idea what is happening with his skeletal face. Anyway, the one thing that never happens in real life happens. When the Acolyte sees something very scary, the first thing he does is to fall on his back. It wasn't even a jump scare, he just did it. And he spilled the holy water, which up until this point was the only thing that was able to protect him from the specters. And just as he realized how much he screwed up, he stood up and ran away. During this semi-action scene, with an epic chase that isn't really a chase, because Thresh can just teleport anywhere on the Shadow Isles, the Acolyte runs over a bridge, which is a brand new place to us. A cool detail here is that you can see the library on the left. You can actually see the bookshelves. And when you realize how long this place is, there has to be quite a lot of books hidden here. Then the Acolyte slips down spiraling stairs, and he ends up in another familiar place. Because this is the library. It looks exactly the same as the image on Universe. So this is where the Wardens of the Blessed Isle spent most of their time. This is where Thresh started before he was moved down to the prisons. And then we have two interesting details right after another. First of all, as the Acolyte looks at his hands, he sees ghastly smoke. This is supposed to indicate the fact that Thresh is near, and that at any point his soul may be ripped from his body. But then, as he finally runs out of this place, he runs through the Celestial Vault again, and here the Lunatropic Demisphere is upside down, meaning that there is no moonlight above it. So as the rest of the cinematic goes on, just remember the little detail that the moon is now gone. That's why the Lunatropic Demisphere was closing. It is totally pointless and meaningless, but gosh darn it, it is an interesting detail. And then, right as he sees the boat, our acolyte slips once again, and he falls on the ground. And Thresh spins his chain, which is something you should remember for the next 1 minute. As the acolyte stands up again and he tries to get into the boat, somehow he gets stopped by the holy sphere. At first you may think that it is the priestess who is holding him back, but that is not the case. The priestess can reach through the holy magic, so he should be able to do it as well. And then it is revealed that the priestess didn't even know that something was happening to the acolyte, so she couldn't have been the one preventing him from entering the boat. And when the acolyte turns around, he sees his dead body, right where he slipped and fell on the ground. So the moment when the acolyte died was when Thresh was spinning his chain. That's why I told you to remember it. That's the moment he died. And that's why he couldn't enter the boat. He was a spirit, and spirits can't go through. And so, just like all the other spirits, he also got sucked back into the lantern. And here you can hear Thresh's voice again, but as I told you, he's not moving his mouth. But that could be because he's narrating the cinematic. He's not technically speaking out loud. And he says that mortals are always lured here by hope, but the undead are always waiting. Which leaves us with the priestess, who now not only lost her husband to the Shadow Isles, but now also her son. And as the shot zooms out, with the same place where the cinematic began, you can notice there is no moon in the background. That's why the Demisphere was closed. Meaningless, I know, but interesting. The last thing I can mention here is the music. Just listen to this. It sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? And that's because this cinematic is using the same instruments that Riot used for Ilawi's theme. After all, just like Ilawi, these people are Buhuru. And so they follow the same theme, they have the same appearance, and they are from the same part of the world. So them having similar music makes sense. But that's pretty much everything I can mention here. It wasn't a cinematic with the most lore, but it was the one with the most hidden details so far. The other ones kinda threw all the details in your face, but here you have to put some effort into finding all the Easter eggs. So, with our third cinematic done, I wonder which one is coming next. I think that since we got some parts of the Ionian cinematic revealed, that one will be last. So next we might either get the Piltover cinematic or the Zone cinematic, with Noxus second to last. Unfortunately, that still means that I don't think we are getting a Shuriman cinematic. Which is a shame because there is definitely quite some room to expand the universe there. Everyone knows about the Explorer, the Abomination, Sonic and Bird. But when was the last time you saw this guy? He has been with League longer than most other champions. Why does he have less lore than her? Hey, did you know that we have social media and Twitch where we talk about other League facts and stories? And did you know that we have need mugs and shirts too? The links to all of that will be below. And as always, thank you, come again.